So, hello and welcome to our latest episode with the Business Boys Bodcast. So, today we're having quite a special episode where we're actually doing it in person. So, meet my friends Will and Hamza. So, today we're going to delve into the recent seismic shifts in the diplomatic landscape between India and Canada. A series of events sparked by the assassination of a Sikh separatist leader in Canada has led to a chilling relations between these two nations. So we'll be particularly focusing on the economic implications of the trade relations that have existed between India and Canada and the effects of that fallout. So join us as we explore the potential impacts on businesses, industries, and individuals in both countries.
So I'll be giving just a bit of kind of like a historical intro, maybe just a bit of demographics, because apparently I find it interesting. So the first question is, what are the bilateral relations between India and Canada? And some people might not know
What bilateral trade is, so let's just explain that. So bilateral trade is essentially an exchange of goods or services between two nations while promoting trade and investment. So it is essentially mutually beneficial relationship where the countries open up their markets and eliminates or reduces tariffs or other barriers.
Thank you for the definition. So Canada and India have long-standing bilateral relations that are built on shared traditions of democracy, pluralism, and strong interpersonal connections. So I guess that is what forms the foundation of these close ties and interactions between India and Canada. But firstly, let's speak a little in terms of population. So Canada is home to one of the largest communities of Indian origin. So that's approximately 4% of Canadians are of Indian heritage, sorry. Are of Indian heritage. So that's around 1.3 million people. And as of 2021, that was like 1.4 million people. So Canada and India enjoy a strategic partnership on two different levels. So the first one is ministerial dialogues, and these dialogues or relations are there to support foreign policy, trade and investment, finance and energy. And at the officials level, so that's the second higher level, there are groups that focus on counterterrorism, security, agriculture, education, and science and technology. But today we'll focus on trade and investment, and which is the biggest issue actually. And we'll also focus a bit on counterterrorism and security, because that is linked to one of the causes of the issue.
Hamza, you mentioned that Canada houses a very large Indian population. So that is one of the reasons why the relations between Canada and India can economically affect both countries, because India gets about 3% of its total GDP from foreign remittances. So the remittances from Canada alone comes up to 3 billion Canadian dollars. No, 3 billion US dollars. This was according to 2022 data. And considering the total remittances to India, which stood at 110 billion US dollars in 2022, it is quite a significant number. And to put things into perspective, any country crossing 100 was not a thing that was of the past. India was one of the first countries to cross 100 billion in foreign remittances, according to a report released by World Bank. So India does depend on its foreign relations to get a lot of its, not a lot, but a significant part of its GDP, which is 3%. Because these remittances are crucial to India's household expenditure.
That's interesting. I didn't know that much about India, so that's good to know. Okay, so let's talk maybe a bit more now about the trade relations and how these all came up to create this, 3% GDP. So it's known that India is a priority market for Canada. So apparently Canada relies a lot on India's um, imp- ex- India's exports, yeah. So in 2022, India was Canada's 10th largest trading partner, and obviously the first one would be the US, with 2020 and 2021 having rising figures.
So we can see the bilateral trade between Canada and India from 2002 2021, with Canada's exports to India in the light blue and Canada's imports from India in the dark blue. And we can see that India's exports to Canada is actually increasing at a really rapid rate. Canada obviously demanding more of the Indian goods. But Canada actually seems to be declining in terms of its exports to India. And I found some data on economic trades between India and Canada. And it seems like in the past few years, trade relations haven't been as good as they have been in the past. And now with the recent political tensions, it's an interesting idea as to whether Canada is going to stop exporting to India as much.
We'll actually be talking about that. I do have some information on that towards the end, because that's kind of like the future of this issue. So we'll be looking at that.
Absolutely. But for people But for people who don't know, I'll just tell them what's happened kind of at the moment. So on the 1st of September, there was an article stating that a trade deal between the two nations was paused. However, two senior New Delhi diplomats have now stated that India is not planning to curb imports to Canada in the future, despite potentially souring diplomatic relations. But Justin Trudeau, who is the Canadian Prime Minister, I've got a quote from him here that I got from a newspaper called Mint. And he said, "Canada will always defend freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, and freedom of peaceful protest, and is extremely important to us. At the same time, we are always there to prevent violence and push back against hatred."
Obviously, Canada will always defend freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, freedom of peaceful protest. That's something that's extremely important to us. At the same time as we're always there to prevent violence, to push back against hatred.
He said that at the G20. So some potentially difficult ramifications from the politics there. And this is even more relevant now because India's economy is growing at a really rapid rate. So let me see, I've got some data here. India's imports in 2021 sat at 563 billion, meaning Canadian imports accounted for 0.5% of India's total imports. Canadian imports in 2021, however, sat around 467 billion, meaning Canada imports over 1.2% of its total goods from India. So Canada's importing double the goods that India is, and Canada is relying on India far more than India is relying on Canada. And the reason that's relevant is because India is due to have some massive growth. So by 2030, India is due to be the world's third largest economy. It's currently the fifth, but India is due to have far more rapid growth than any other country in the G20. Goldman Sachs projects that India will be the world's second largest economy by 2075. We can see the graph of what that will look like. India actually overtaking the USA by 2075. So yeah, whether Canada wants to get into political tensions with India is a little bit controversial at the moment.
I guess things might change because it's a sensitive time for India as well because elections are coming up next year. So
how will that affect things?
I don't know. I think maybe the current opposition has very different views than the ruling party right now. So that could possibly affect these current trade relations between India and Canada because if there is a change in government, that could maybe be a positive, maybe bring about a positive effect, or maybe the current government can get to terms with Canada. But as of right now, I think that you'd have to wait and kick the can down the road and see how it plays out.
Yeah, so from what I've found, two officials said they weren't going to change anything in terms of imports, but we just don't know, do we?
I would say that like India definitely wouldn't want to antagonize Canada either more than what's already happened. There's already tensions between the two countries, and I'm assuming both countries would definitely be trying to defuse the situation and make it worse.
You would hope so, wouldn't you? India maybe more so because Canada's consuming a lot more of their India's imports now.
Yeah, I was about to say that India did not suspend its steel trade, I believe. Let me just check this. So India's steel secretary, just going back to your discussion, India's steel secretary tells reporters that India's exports to Canada are not affected. But this wasn't on September 28th. So it kind of shows that, it kind of shows that they're trying not to make a bigger issue out of this.
It's like a bit of a visualization of that. So we can see the Canada exports to India and the India exports to Canada on the right, and we see metals is 14%. So this was 2022. So yeah, a large metal trade there from India to Canada.
That's 14%. It is quite high in comparison to...
It's the third largest, yeah.
But I'm just a bit, it seems interesting how they're only kind of changing they're not necessarily changing exports or imports, but they're changing, so that's when India told Canada they must repatriate 41 diplomats by October 10. So once again, they're not really playing with like trading more than they're playing with kind of like diplomats and like people in Canada. So that seems like an interesting aspect. Why aren't they reacting in terms of trade? So is that like a way to still keep the relationship strong?
I personally think that in this particular situation, it would be a lose-lose for both countries if any one of the countries retaliated via trade or imposed a trade war on each other. So while I think both countries are just making their stances clear by sending back diplomats or whatever, but they also want to make it clear that they don't want it to affect either of their economies, or they don't want to make, because if it reaches that extent, then there would be damages there'll be significant damages on the economies of both countries, and I'm sure both of them don't want that.
Mm-hmm. Who do you think is more willing to keep the relationship between them? I mean, maybe it's not a contradictory question. I guess it's just more of how, like, their behavior in terms of this. What do you think is more likely?
It's mutually beneficial with the whole term bilateral trade. Yeah, we've seen from the data Canada has a bigger dependence on India for its goods, but then India's making more money than Canada in the trade. So,
well, and I did find some research on this. It seems that Canada is reacting a bit too fast in terms of this. So what they did was they slowed down the sales of lentil to India.
Yes, yeah.
That was and Canada is one of the it's one of the largest exports to India. In terms of this, it seems like Canada's more leaning towards affecting the trade, but India is more leaning towards kind of messing around with nationals and diplomats. So what they also did in September 22 was that India suspended issuing new visas for Canadian nationals. So they also asked Ottawa to reduce its diplomatic presence in India. So once again, it's not playing with trading.
Yeah, I think India is taking more of an approach where trades aren't getting affected, because I feel like if trades get affected, its citizens are also going to get affected. But that
keeps the money going.
Yeah, I I also read that apparently last month, Reuters released a report which said that JSW Steel of India slowed down the process of buying stakes in Canada's tech resources. So even some private companies are unsure about what's going to happen. So there is some speculation in the market.
This is it. I mean, it's not as extreme as the Russia-Ukraine war, but we saw there's sanctions and a lot of political pressure, and we see that's one extreme of how it changes. And I guess this is a little bit smaller than that, but you can see how it can escalate and how people can withdraw from the countries.
Yeah. So before all this happened, bilateral trade essentially reached around 12 billion Canadian dollars in 2022, and this was a substantial increase from the previous year amount, which was almost 57% increase than the previous year. And then I also have to stress that this only accounts for about 0.70% of India's total trade. So there were supposed to be trade talks to be held between India and Canada to make the trade relations more efficient and make it better, but those have also come to a halt because of the current situation. Essentially, I would say that maybe future opportunities for the countries have also been affected.
Okay, so I guess that is the final bit of our episode, and we have come to a close. Just a summary of what we went through today. We've talked about the bilateral relations between India and Canada and the recent issue between them. So 2023 again is quite an eventful year. Thank you for watching this special episode with Will, Kev, and I. Don't forget to hit that notification. Oh no. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you can always get updates from us. Also, don't forget to follow us on all our socials, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. All right, so we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Hi.
You got one job. One job. This guy.
Hold me close till I get up.